I'm joined today by Jason Gray, a serious tech enthusiast and early adopter of machine learning and AI, with over 3 decades of coding experience under his belt, having collaborated with Fortune 100 giants such as Target, formerly the CTO of Lifetime Fitness, and currently spearheading innovation at WearCorp. Jason, thank you so much for being in my orbit and for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations.
Sure. Thanks, Lauren.
Well, I want to dive into AI today. And before we really get into some of the nitty gritty behind it, and its impact, I want to know, why is everybody talking about it? It's been around since the 1950s. Everybody and their mother right now, though, is talking about it. Why now? Why today?
Yeah, AI has been around for a long time. We had a self-driving car in the 1970s, but it just drove very, very slowly. What's really happened over the years, though, is the size of data available to train larger and larger models has really exploded. And so we really saw that with ChatGPT. I don't remember the date. I think it was last Halloween or whatever that was when it kind of made the news there. But that was the result of starting to train very, very large models, and a lot of emergent properties came out of training such a large model that people didn't really expect. And so it allowed for tools like ChatGPT to exist. So you get a new kind of very fluent interface. And a lot of things came out of that as well, that papers were written about that people didn't even expect, like the ability to navigate a map of a building via a language model, for example. Even the OpenAI researchers were surprised by that. They didn't train it to do that, but it just kind of spontaneously happened.
Yeah. So you feel like it's definitely something that will continue then? You feel like, is there more surprise to be had?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's very clear by even the public news that you see from OpenAI and Microsoft, Amazon, and the various other language model folks. They're trying to train larger and larger data sets. Every model generation, and it's just going to get, it's going to get kind of weird. You know, these things are already kind of magical in a lot of ways. Yeah, they have rough edges. They're not perfect, but they're going to get better and better, and in some surprising ways, especially with these generations that are being worked on right now that are multimodal, which means, those models are trained on not just text, but also images and video and audio. And that just means that the model can understand more, and it can also kind of converse and translate between all of those modalities.
Do you think we'll still need human intervention in the training of models, or do you think at some point they'll start to train themselves, and is that a desirable outcome?
So, I mean, I think human intervention is probably not quite the right word. Models do need input to be trained. Right now, a vast majority of that input comes from content that people have produced, books and blog posts and news and what have you. There are goals that these companies have to start to generate data that's not from humans, and use that data to train the models. I haven't read any papers yet on whether that's been successful or scalable, but it is a goal to get these things to kind of learn on their own in a much more robust way.
Got it. Okay. So intervention was not the right word. Got it. Okay. This is where, again, people like me should not be talking about this. It's just why I'm glad people like you are. So speaking of human impact here, last time we talked, you had some concerns about how this was going to impact the next generation of software engineers, people who are considering getting into the field. Can you tell me more about what you're thinking when it comes to those who are considering a career and those who maybe have just started, the junior developers?
Yeah. It's a little bit of the Wild West right now, as far as, there's a lot of people that are very negative about the impact of AI, saying it's garbage and it's not going to replace anybody's job. There's other people that are saying, but like Jensen from NVIDIA says, don't teach your kids computer engineering anymore because they're not going to need it. That's on the other end, very hyperbolic. I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle where, you know, these tools are just that. They're tools. And we don't quite understand how much leverage these tools are going to provide. You know, is it going to take one developer and turn that person into, you know, be able to do the productivity of 3 developers or 5 developers or 10 or 100? We don't have the answer to that question yet. You know, there's a lot of people studying it, and it's also something that's going to change with every generation of model. Um, I'm of the opinion that you know, there are a lot of highly motivated and highly compensated companies that are working on this problem, and that they will solve many aspects of it, which means, you know, the number of people that are required per unit of productivity is going to go down. You know, is that going to mean we need half the labor force? I don't know. But I do know we're going to need fewer developers. We're going to need fewer lawyers. We're going to need fewer people to do a lot of this knowledge work for the same unit of productivity. You know, the other part that comes into this is, you know, right now and historically forever in computing, businesses have never been able to afford enough people to do all the work they want to get done in the time that they want to do it. So there's this big backlog of work. So I think what we're going to see is a really slow ramp of, you know, maybe these tools, let's just say today, you know, based on my experience that, you know, ChatGPT or other similar models are going to allow 1 developer to equal 5. Um, you know, that's going to be really great for the next year, the next 2 years, because businesses are going to be able to catch up and they're going to be able to burn their backlogs down. And, you know, especially as these models improve, that capability will even expand more. Once the businesses kind of run out of a backlog, though, we're either going to have to start coming up with new and different ideas or new and different businesses, or we're just not going to have any work to do. And when that's going to happen, I don't know. Um, but you know, I do see that over time, it's going to have a net impact of, you know, reducing the number of available jobs to software engineers. Uh, you know, I don't think there's a question about that. I think it's just a matter of how much and how quickly. Um, is that a good or a bad thing? You know, that'll be for society to judge. um, I'm hoping that it happens more slowly and that we all have time to adjust. But you know, I think if people are considering a job in computer science, you know, definitely go into machine learning and learn your math because it, you know, that's where a lot of the cutting edge work is going to be. And you know, what you're going to see then is a lot of people that historically would have trained to be a software engineer, they're not going to need as much training, and they may not even really need to know much about software engineering. You know, again, this is more the Jensen point of view, from you know, CEO of NVIDIA. Like he's more of the mindset and that people that aren't even developers today are going to be able to craft code and applications for business without having to even know how to program. You know, I think that's a ways off, but I do think it'll happen. We're already seeing, you know, tastes of that right now.
So would you deter somebody then? You mentioned if someone's interested in getting a degree in computer science, focus on machine learning, get your mathematics down, but would you deter somebody from considering a CS degree and instead go into a different trade altogether?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, and in fact, I even have done that. I've talked to a lot of young people lately, and you know, if they're not really passionate about it and like want to do it in their hearts, they want to just do it because it's a good job or they make a lot of money or whatever. Like they shouldn't do it. We need to make sure that the people going into computer science are really passionate and that like that's what they really, you know, get a kick out of, and that's what they really want to do. Because I don't know that, you know, everybody else really needs it anymore. You know, there are going to be easier ways for them to get a similar job done in the future.
Yeah. This is a little bit tangential, but I felt like in 2020, 21, even 22, I felt like there was this huge push for people to go to boot camps. And a lot of people got on that bandwagon because I think there was the promise of this is kind of an easy job. You can make a lot of money. People wanted just to have something that was a little bit more stable. And I don't know, I just it seemed like there was this gold rush. And then now flash forward to where we are today, and many people have lost their jobs and have only, been doing it for a couple of years, again, coming out of a boot camp. And I don't know how passionate, I'm not speaking, I don't want to speak in broad terms here. Not everybody felt this way, but a lot of people weren't really passionate about the craft itself. It was the nature of the work, the status, the money. Do you think that the impact you've been describing also will kind of weed out people who don't really love this, who don't
Yeah.
want to stick it out through the grind?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to weed them out from becoming software engineers or, people that program all day. A lot of people that went to those boot camps and continue to this day, their goal was not necessarily to become a software engineer. It was more to, maybe they were doing a startup and they wanted to code part of it themselves. That's still very valid. I think a lot of those kind of people, though, are just, they're not going to need to know much about software, say 5 years from now. They're going to be able to go have a chat with with a chat bot, and they're going to be smart enough at that point to create rather robust applications without too much actual software engineering. As long as you can describe what you want accurately and with some amount of logical rigor, you know the the computer will be able to make it for you. You're not going to need to go write code for that. So, in a lot of ways, it's kind of an extension of what's been happening over the decades with coding in general. We used to have to do that on punch cards, and then we had C, and then we had, I'm not going to go through all the languages, but it's like it's been getting easier and easier and easier to do rather complicated things over time. And you look at some of the new languages that people are using with, say, Go or Python, or well, Python's not new, but a lot of those languages let people do things that used to be really, really hard. The chatbots are just going to be even an easier way to do programming.
So you mentioned that I like the evolution. You go from the punch cards to where we are today. Do you feel like so is this that more substantial of a leap than say a Stack Overflow? Like for engineers who, to your point, maybe they're working the .NET or with .NET and then on the JVM and then Python and then Go and then Google search and then Stack Overflow is another tool in the toolbox. But is this just another tool in the toolbox? Or is this really something that much more? I mean, it sounds like it's so much more substantial than just another tool, but I guess I'm kind of curious because I have heard it also references it's just another tool in the toolbox.
Um, I mean, that's kind of a philosophical question, I guess. I mean, I've said it is a tool, and that is true. I don't think it's anything more than that, but I think in this particular case with these large language models, it is a tool that allows us to make a much larger leap than previous generations of tools. You look at, um, like your example with going from Google to Stack Overflow to now, ChatGPT. It used to be that you had to use a book. Remember those? You had a reference manual this big, and you had to look it up. And then Google came along, and that was a leap. That I could solve my problem no longer in 10 minutes. Now I could solve it in 1 minute. Stack Overflow started to bring in some more of the I don't know, consultative nature of problem solving, where people talk about a problem and they maybe solve it three different ways, and we all talk about what's best. You know, ChatGPT kind of combines all of that and takes all of those modalities and more, and allows you to discuss a problem with the computer at speed that you just can't in, say, Stack Overflow. I post a question to Stack Overflow, I might not get an answer for 3 days. With ChatGPT, unless it's a brand new problem that's literally never been seen before, ChatGPT is probably going to be able to get me to an answer rather quickly. And if I don't like what it says to start with, I can talk to it. I can say, oh, no, I actually meant this, and it will adjust and it comes up with a good answer. And I think, that's very, very different than the past. And it has I think, a much larger uh, acceleration metric, I guess you'd say, than the previous jumps.
As a hiring leader, you mentioned that, your team might go from 5 until to 1. You might not need all of those engineers. It might be a reduction in headcount just given, the tools that we now have. What would that one engineer look like? Would that be a senior or would that be a junior? Again, looking pragmatically at cost. I mean, what would that person look like?
Yeah, I think that's going to change over time. Right now, what I'm seeing is that um, projects where we might have staffed a team of 3 or 4 developers, we may only put one on that project now. Usually, those are going to be pretty senior developers because the large language models are still not good enough to write perfect code every time and to also know what's best to do every single time. Again, though, over the years, I think that's going to change. 3 years from now, 4 years, 5 years, I think somebody with very little programming experience is going to be able to do a lot of programming, um, without having to write code. Um, and so, I think that's something people need to think about. And are we going to be wanting to hire a bunch of junior software engineers right now? Probably not, because I think by the time they would become seniors, we probably don't need any of that experience anymore. Um, and again, I don't want to be too hyperbolic. There's always going to be a need for developers. You know, even if the large language models were perfect, until they could get to the point where they can improve themselves, which is way off yet. You know, humans are always going to need to be in there making the language models better. But there's a lot of day-to-day programming tasks, design tasks, writing tasks that we're just not going to need the level of experience that we used to.
Does that cause you pain as a result of, I mean, we've talked about this before, but you've really loved investing in and mentoring and kind of shepherding engineers, through their journey and maybe not being, financially, that's might not be the best decision as a company that needs to run leaner or, be more fiscally responsible. I guess I'm curious, does that cause you pain on a human level that this might not need the investment in these types of individuals getting into the space or coming up in the space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's pain, but it is a part of my job that I've enjoyed over the years is mentoring people with less experience. You know, I think there's enough exciting things to do right now that I'm not personally feeling a lot of pain, but it is as an industry, I think we need to think very carefully about who we're mentoring and how we're mentoring them. Kind of getting back to what we talked about earlier, that we need to be finding the the cream of the crop, people that are the most passionate about the actual computer science part of it and the actual math part of it. Math is a lot more important in machine learning, and we're going to see an uptick in that, I think, as well. um, I don't think we're going to be looking for people that are fresh out of a boot camp, or maybe they went through school but in an interview they're really not very interested in learning new technology, for example. They just want to be a Java developer or a Python developer, and that's all they ever want to do. Probably not the type of person that we're going to be looking to hire going forward. We need to be looking at people that love the technology and love to learn new things, and see these new tools as useful tools, and they know how to use them to be that 5x, 10x, 20x kind of a developer. And yeah.
Yeah, you touched on this before outside of software engineering that this is going to have larger implications for other white collar professions. Do you mind sharing more about kind of what you're seeing, I guess, already maybe the trends are headed outside of, again, software engineering, what other industries and how they're being impacted?
There's already been a couple studies about lawyering. I don't know what the right verb for that is, but this paper was they looked at what this was looking at comparing the contract and figuring out which version of the contract was more favorable to which party. Okay, and that's a task that they do all the time. They know that it takes a paralegal this long. They know it takes a senior lawyer this long, and they brought in a language model, and they did a rather robust study of a few hundred examples. And what they found was that the language model did as good or better than any of the humans, including the senior lawyers, and it did it at in minutes rather than days.
Wow.
And you know that's one study. There have been many others, and there will be many more in many domains. Law is just one of them that happens to be really easy to go after for a language model because law is almost all text. And the parts of law that aren't text are audio and video, and that's very easy to convert into text nowadays as well. And so, I think that's aside from software engineering, the law is going to be next, and definitely kind of being done already. There's some really smart companies that have had these kind of language models for many years, and they're able to do this really well. Um, I think it's also very interesting. We're starting to uh, see these models, or not language models per se, but similar kind of computer models around visual arts. So either bitmap or vector drawings. Where you look at some of the Canva or some of these other software platforms that are new. I'm struggling on the name of the one. Uh, I'll think of it in a little while, but they allow you to say draw a box and then describe what you want in that box. I want a logo of an eagle holding a fish, or whatever, and it allows you to really rapidly iterate through pretty nicely done vector art of that concept, and then lock in your choice and make adjustments to it. You don't need to know Adobe Illustrator anymore to do that. And those types of tools are here now. You see them from Adobe, you see them from a lot of other companies, and they're just going to keep getting better and better and better. And so, a lot of the visual arts are going to be in there as well. The video side of things and motion graphics, that's, I think, a little bit further out. We're seeing some of these first tastes of, being able to generate 60-second video clips and things like that. Um, the amount of data and compute required to do that is still very, very high. But they'll solve that. I mean, that's always been a problem, and it just takes time to solve it. And will we see a fully AI produced Disney feature length film anytime soon? Probably not. But you better bet that Disney and Hulu and all of those companies are very, very interested in this technology. So
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I feel like my generation, not to go again too far off on a tangent, but I felt like my generation was told go to college, go to grad school, get your white collar job. And I feel like now that the pendulum might be swinging towards, again, there's a lot of trades out there that pay very well that a lot of my generation wasn't encouraged to go after. And
yeah,
unfortunately, I think, would be more stable and they even allow for people to be their own business owner in a lot of ways in running some of these. I guess, is that also part of your advice too for this kind of next generation, is that there are these trades that I think for a long time got a lot of shit, which is kind of unfortunate because they're well
like plumbing.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, it's just amazing. I feel like that was something that was never fostered or encouraged, So I'm kind of excited in a lot of ways. I do think that would be great for our economy too, just because I think there's been a gap in a lot of ways where people didn't go towards those,
yeah,
careers. And apprenticeship could be coming back as sort of, baked in more of our model. And as college continues to rise in price, that this may be an avenue for people who couldn't afford it and don't want to be saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars of student debt could seek another pathway. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a that's a philosophy that we've followed with our own children. That technology is great. You should learn it, but you should also be learning how to make bread or make do things with your hands and be present in the physical world because we're one way or the other it's going to become important pretty quickly here.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how to do something real in the physical world, you may not have too much to do unless you're a really creative person, maybe.
Well, I think it's also really healthy for us to get out of the Truman Show every now and again, and like you said, bake bread or go dig in the dirt, do something real, read a real book. Like I think that's very important. Kind of speaking of where we're headed, I am curious about the companies, the puppeteers pulling the strings here. In Silicon Valley, what are your thoughts about how much we should trust them? I guess I have read now, I'm on my second book that sort of airs on being doom and gloom. I am curious, do you trust these companies that are behind a lot of this?
I don't trust companies in general about anything. So I think in my mind, uh, Silicon Valley, machine learning, no machine learning. I think companies are incentivized to make their bottom lines better, and that's what they're going to do. That's what they're made for. And so I think, you know, trusting them to look out for the little guy or for the rest of humanity, I, that's not what they're here for. So I wouldn't expect that out of them.
It's fair. Do you find yourself then feeling more of a charge than ever to, sort of self-govern your usage of these tools? Or I guess my question is really rooted in how much do you allow progress to just continue, or is there any part of you that wants to just like slam the brakes and go disappear off the grid somewhere? Because it feels like there's this. I get a little bit at times freaked out about how much is being exposed, like not just my data being exposed, but the fact that I'm bombarded constantly or I'm always plugged in. And there's a point in time where I often feel like I just want to say to hell with it all and leave. You have a much more intimate view, and I think a better idea of where this is all going, and the impact to your world in particular, your career. Do you ever want to just say to hell with it and get off the grid?
Not really. I think we're all still having a lot of fun. I think there's, you know, what I'm hoping for is that ramp of productivity is slow and that businesses still have a lot of work that they need to get done and that we all have time to adjust to this. Um, but yeah, again, I think having some practical skills and maybe not jumping off the grid right now, but being ready or being at least aware of your environment and where you might go if things do go haywire is probably not a terrible idea. I did I you know a lot of the early thinking of this a few years ago was that this was going to happen super fast. I don't think it's going to happen fast enough to really break things in a significant way like this year. You know, do I think it's going to be a decade? No, I really don't. And so I do think we need to move quickly, or we will have more broad societal problems. And so what I'm hoping for and what I'm pushing for in a lot of conversations is to get the government to kind of wake up a little bit about some of these things and really learn them or hire advisors or do whatever they need to do. I don't know much about government, but like uh, they need to understand how this is all going to impact society, which segments is going to impact, so that they can put policies and incentives in place to make sure that we don't have any kind of collapse. And I'm hoping that we can have the time to do that. I mean, my basis for that is perhaps not super scientific, but I've been doing machine learning since the early 2000s, specifically in natural language processing, which is kind of what a lot of these chat experiences kind of grew up out of. And what we saw from older versions of we'll just use OpenAI with ChatGPT. That's been a thing for many years. They've had that product for a long time. The difference between GPT prior to 3 and 3.5, it was massive. And and I think that's going to just kind of continue to happen at a very rapid pace. It's all going to come down to amassing data, and there are a lot of very motivated people amassing large amounts of every type of data you can imagine. So I think we are going to see at least a few more very large jumps in language model performance, and I think even one or two more jumps is going to have a really dramatic impact on the productivity and the size of that lever that we get with this tool.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, we're still early on in 2024. How do you feel about this year? I mean, I know we're only in April now, but I mean, still early. How do you feel about what's on the horizon just for this year alone? What are you, I guess, excited about? Is there anything that you're already, I don't know, feeling trepidatious about in kind of under this umbrella?
No, I mean, I'm excited to see some of these tools mature and kind of get a different, maybe a non-chat interface. I'm really excited. Personally, I'm a developer, I'm a coder by nature, and so I really like what's going on in our coding environments. How these tools are being used within the developer experience in novel ways, and I think that's going to just increase even further. Maybe even getting away from a text-based approach, which is kind of what it does now, to looking at the actual uh, syntax tree of the code and operating at that level, or maybe interfacing with the debugger. These would be very exciting things to me because those are still some of the more challenging things, especially for a new developer. And if we had a chat interface to a debugger or kind of that lower level uh, interface, I think the conversations we could have with our code would be more intimate and more productive because we could ask very interesting questions about memory and performance and efficiency and things like this. That's kind of exciting to me. Personally, really excited about having a bit of a background in the arts is the the application of models to visual arts. I think is also really cool. I appreciate art, I appreciate design, but I fail at the mechanics of it. Not a very good. I can't draw very well. I never was able to operate Illustrator or Photoshop very well, but now I can actually do some neat things that are in my head that I just couldn't do with my hands, and that's really exciting because I think that's part of the empowering nature of all of this technology is if you have it in your head, you can get it done now, and you maybe don't need to hire a team of 5 people to do it uh, because the tools are there for you. So I
Yeah.
think that's pretty cool.
Oh, I love that. Well, I hopefully you get some of your art out there into the wild for us to enjoy. I actually, so this ties into my last question. So I know there was a little bit, and I don't think doom and gloom is the right descriptor, but there's some sobering, I think, advice in here that you had for people who are both seasoned, professionals and those who are coming into the market. I am curious, do you think there's a lot of opportunity here too? Like outside of maybe what career path they had initially thought of, but do you think there's a lot of opportunity to leverage the hell out of these tools to make income in a new way because it further amplifies maybe a skill set or a passion they had before? Do you think there's so much possibility too for people now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you were maybe somebody today as a designer, they can do the wireframes and the mockups, but they never learned how to code, or vice versa. You're a coder and you never learned how to design. You know, those are going to be really easy pathways in my industry, where people that used to be able to only play one side of that fence can now just do both, because they maybe knew just enough to be dangerous, and now the tool can help them the rest of the way. Um, I think the other thing that people should be looking at is their own personal scalability. You know, if if you are the kind of person that maybe we're working on one or two clients at a time as a freelancer or something. It would not surprise me in the least if even right now you could maybe double that. And I think that's pretty cool because it lets you help more people. Uh, at the same time, I think the conundrum is, well, what do I charge for that? If I'm a freelancer and I charge $100 an hour for writing code, but now I can write code in half the time, but the client's still getting the same benefit. What do I charge for that now? Do I raise my rates, or do I do flat fee billing? I don't know. These are some very interesting problems to think through, and I think we're going to all have to be dealing with that this year.
No, it seems like no one's exempt. So I can't thank you enough, Jason. I'm so grateful for all the advice you have. I mean, it's pertinent to a lot of folks, myself, a lot of people that are in my orbit. So I'm excited for people to hear this. And I do think there's as much hope and excitement and possibility. And I do think I think human beings are so incredibly resilient. So I think that no matter what gets thrown our way, I do think people will figure out a way. And I'm excited. So even with some of the scary stuff, change is scary no matter what it is. And I do think, though, people will have a chance to really shine in a lot of ways here. So I am grateful, though, that you shared I think, some things to be cautiously aware, very much aware, and again, some of the sobering truths that are in this. So thank you for joining me today on Cupalo Conversations and just for being in my orbit in general.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.